Good afternoon. This is Dr. Victor McCullough again, meeting this afternoon with Reverend Dr. Jesse Jackson Jr. Reverend Jackson is the pastor of East 6th Street Christian Church in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. But Dr. Jackson also has a national role. He is the immediate past president of the National Convocation of the Christian Church Disciple of Christ in North America, including Canada. In addition to that, Dr. Jackson is bivocational in terms of he is employed by the Oklahoma Public Schools and working in the extended educational services. And so Dr. Jackson, it is our honor to have you today, and you'll be speaking to students of the Intro to Ministry course 301 at the St. Paul School of Theology. How are you, sir?
Doing well, doing well. How are you guys doing?
Okay, all right. Great. Reverend Jackson, I just want to talk to you this afternoon about your role as a minister and a pastor in the church. Talk to us. I mean, you've been serving East 6th Street for 20 years.
Yes.
Been in the ministry about 26 years or so. So talk to us about your role as you serve as a pastor in the church.
Okay. My first seminary course was called The Pastor as Resident Theologian.
Okay.
I didn't know what that meant at that time, but I certainly know now, because theology matters. And as we were talking beforehand, all theology, like I think education, comes from a particular point of view, and it comes out of a particular set of shared experiences. And so I pastor an urban African-American, predominantly, congregation, professional congregation. So a lot of teachers, a lot of retired teachers, a lot of professionals in there, and a lot of history. The church is almost a century old. And so that carries a great deal of baggage in and of itself. And here I am coming in, because I began to pastor at 30, and trying to lead a congregation in a more progressive way, to think differently and to do some things that they'd never done, to think theologically different than they ever thought before. I am more African-centered, than my predecessor. I teach from the Bible. I talk about the ethnicity of biblical characters, and I'm socially active, and it took a little bit to kind of get them there, but it has shaped who joined the congregation as well. So now, since I've been there 20 years, everybody that joins that congregation, they know what they're getting. Nobody is surprised. They know they're getting a pastor that is active, a pastor that speaks out on social issues, and a pastor that does things in the community. I'm not going to just stay in the pulpit and preach and everybody have a good time. We'll shake hands and I'll see you next week. That's not what I do.
That kind of leads into what we're going to be talking about this afternoon, because I would like you to talk about that. You started off saying pastor as theologian, resident theologian, but speak to us about your understanding of the pastor as evangelist.
I think one of the things that I've tried to do, I run a revival once a year, for one of our sister congregations, but my evangelism at East 6th Street, I think, has been my activism. I placed myself in different places, not necessarily for evangelism, but see, most people have an evangelism team or an evangelism ministry. I think that ministry is evangelism, period. And I just make evangelism a part of what I do. So even when I'm with Black Lives Matters, even when I'm with Occupy the Corners OKC, even when I'm with the National Action Network here in Oklahoma City, evangelism is all a part of that, because I'm always inviting people. I'm always talking to them about what we do at East 6th Street, so much so until now East 6th Street has become synonymous with a lot of those things. So again, we are attracting a certain type of visitor and a certain type of member that comes in now. So we have just flipped evangelism on its head, so to speak. Don't have just a team knocking on doors. We're in the streets and doing other things, and that has been our evangelism.
How then do you conceptualize that? Do you offer a definition of evangelism? What works for you?
I don't have a classical definition of that. What we've done was try to give them a working model of the gospel, a model of justice, a model of love. That has been, our evangelism. That's what we share with people. That's the good news that we share, that even in a world filled with injustice, that our God is still a God of justice. And God is a God that will stand up for those that have been on the other side of justice. And so that has been what we have done there. And I have just stayed away from the traditional models. I just think that there are congregations, it's like ice cream flavors. I mean, you have congregations that fit any kind of style or theology that you want. So in order for us to be, I think, effective at East 6th Street, we had to find our niche. We had to find our flavor. And once we found our flavor, that's what we offer to humanity. That's what we offer to Oklahoma City. That's not everybody's cup of tea. We'll never have 5,000 folk at East 6th Street. And that suits us just fine. What I want more than anything else is for us to be effective. I want us to effect change in people's lives and to be a blessing to humanity. That's what matters more than anything else.
As you model evangelism, how do you help others get engaged and to follow you as you follow Christ?
I think you have to do it with them. When you do ministry, you don't do ministry to people, you do ministry with people. For instance, tonight we're feeding the homeless downtown in Oklahoma City at First Church on 4th and Robinson. We have a multiplicity of people in roles down there. Like my wife coordinates everything, and she'll be in the kitchen with everybody doing that. The thing that I do, in addition to serving communion and doing all that, we meet with the people, we talk to them, and we have developed, because we've been doing this over years, we have developed relationships with these people. We know about their families, we know about them, we know where they're from, we know their stories. And so that's a part of what I think ministry is. You do ministry with people, you learn their stories, and when people find out that you actually care for real, that it's not fake, then you'll be surprised how folks open up to you, and how people, and how that would actually draw people to you, because they will feel that realness in you.
Right. I think about a pretty popular verse that people in various circles have different interpretations of. And the verse is John 10:10. Jesus says, "I have come that you might have life and have it abundantly." He says prior to that, the thief comes but to kill, steal, and destroy. Now I've heard so-called prosperity pastors and teachers wax on that. I've heard staunch evangelists, revivalists teach on that, and I've heard social prophetic preachers. How do you deal with helping people to understand abundant life, and how, in the challenges that we face in the world today, do you help people as an evangelist find that abundant life?
I think you have to move it out of the money conversation. If you move money out of the conversation, then you can talk about being happy. You can talk about being fulfilled in your life. First of all, we all know that money does not fulfill us. It helps, but it's not, it's not the end all. And so one of the issues that I have with prosperity preachers is that, the prosperity that they often talk about deals only with money. And of course, the only people that seem to be prospering are them. And so, that's another thing. But I really think that we want people to live fulfilled and happy lives. My wife and I talk all the time. Neither one of us make the money that our siblings make. We did not go into those kind of fields. We did not go into medicine. We did not go into law. We don't make the money that they make, but we live fulfilled lives. And that's all right with us. We don't have to make that money. We have done well. We have our home. We have our cars. We have our children and grandchildren, and we are doing well. And God has blessed us, and that's fulfillment, and that's happiness. That's prosperity right there to us. Because I don't have a laundry list of things that I wish I had done. If God says now is the time and I'm getting ready to take you on, I don't have a list of regrets that I did not do. Yeah, God has allowed me to travel the world, man. I've been to Palestine. I've been to Ghana. I've been to Mexico. I've been doing ministry, and I've been vacationing and everything else. And so that's prosperity. That's abundance. I have lived an abundant life, and I plan to continue to live one until God says something different. So I think you have to take the money out, because if you don't take the money out, everybody thinks that, well, if I'm not a millionaire, then I've done something wrong. And God, quite frankly, did not intend for all of us to be millionaires. That's why somebody got 10 talents, one got 5, and one got 1. That is the way that it works. Perhaps you're the one that got the 1. But what are you going to do with that 1? Are you going to bury it, or are you going to use it? Because I'm a firm believer that God will not add more to you until you prove yourself trustworthy to use what God has already given you. And likewise, if you're blessed to have 10, if you hoard that 10 and you do not share that 10 with the rest of humanity, I believe that God will snatch those from you and give them to somebody else. So I try to keep the finances out of prosperity talk. I don't do a whole bunch of prosperity talk anyway, but I don't want us to look at it as money, because then we equate people that have money with people that are doing things right, people that are moral, and we know that we know that not to be true. Most wealth is handed down and inherited anyway. Folks had nothing to do with it. They were born into it. Some folks are born with a silver spoon. Some folks are born with a plastic spork. That's just what it is. And if you don't have money, and if you have that kind of parameter set up, if you don't have money, then it means that you're sinful. It means you're not doing something right, and that's not godly. That's not biblical.
Let me push that just a little further. Again, as we're talking to theology students, in the area of theology, how crucial is the role of pastor evangelists in the church? And what type of theological underpinnings do you rely on as you understand the role of sharing good news in the world, in the larger community and world?
I can't help but come out of my tradition. Born and reared in Mississippi, a 4th generation minister. I grew up Baptist. I'm now Disciples of Christ, of course. But that is a part of who I am. That is a part of the foundation of who I am. It's a very Bible-based kind of foundation, although seminary and life has broadened my horizons dramatically, and I'm so glad about that. But it's more of a prophetic voice, from the Black church, Old Testament prophet. Now, it's not doom and gloom. It is good news. It's good news. I have modeled my ministry on 4 people. I think every preacher has a Mount Rushmore of preachers. And my pastoral ministry, I have modeled on the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, former pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. But also Frank Anthony Thomas, Dr. Thomas, who literally wrote the books on preaching. If y'all don't have Frank Thomas's books, get those books. Reverend Dr. H. Beecher Hicks, retired pastor of Metropolitan Baptist Church in D.C. area. And then Reverend Dr. Cynthia Hill, one of our pastors in Decatur, Georgia. And I have modeled my stuff on them. They all have parts that I've taken. Ministry is a quilt, and I've taken parts from all of them, and now that is who I have become. I think pastors have to lay the parameters and the framework. That's why you can't just allow anybody to just preach. You know, you have to have some kind of idea, because if you're not discerning about who you allow to preach in your congregation, one 30-minute sermon would take you 3 months to try to fix, if you can fix it in 3 months. And so I think you set the parameters, and again, you know, the people that are trusting you because they're looking at you and they're looking to you to be the resident theologian. And so you're helping them. It's not just on Sundays. Wednesdays is vital. Wednesdays is vital. You don't just stand up in Sundays and just all of a sudden start floating new stuff. You introduce that stuff on Wednesdays, and you have a core group of people on Wednesdays that you do that with, and that helps disseminate it throughout the congregation. And so when you do that, I think you're in good shape. But that sets the parameters. But you don't do theology yourself. It has to be a group. It has to be a congregational kind of thing. And again, so when you hear the name of the congregation, you have an idea of what the theology of that congregation is. I mean, if you don't have an idea of it, then, you know, maybe, hey, you know, I don't know what I get. It's a kind of catch as catch can. One of the things I like about the Christian Church Disciples of Christ is that because we have so much flexibility and autonomy, you can go in any disciple congregation in the United States and Canada and have a 50-50 chance of feeling right at home, of being absolutely repulsed by what you see, because we have that much room for individuality in there. You know, of course, the common denominator would be, you know, the table. We serve communion every Sunday, and some of us serve it at different times. Some of it, you know, in the middle of the service, at the end of the service. But you know, we have high church, we have low church, and you have the urban and the rural, and all kind of different settings, charismatic. And so you can go in, and just because you see a chalice, you may not find what you found at home. But then again, you may come into something that's just completely new and beautiful that you've never seen before.
Let's talk then about your experience with the church, and even as it relates to the national church. I know that you have over 400 congregations,
yes,
in your convocation.
Yes.
And so many of those congregations, white, black, Hispanic, and these congregations are both throughout North America. In a day and age where a lot of people are shooting statements in the media, how can you best help congregations to systematically not buy into statements or slogans or ideology that are of God, that are anti-intellectual, that are exclusionary, that are biased, and that create more division in the body of Christ as to bringing healing and help to the body as a whole?
Well, that's the tough question that I think most denominations have been dealing with. I know we certainly have in our General Assembly, as we gathered and we dealt with things, LGBT issues and other issues. Thank God we're not dealing with the role of women in ministry anymore. But you know, you have individual, you have issues like that. But we have that kind of autonomy. Autonomy is the wrong word. We don't have autonomy. It's an interdependence, and we do own our building and call our own ministers, but we have a covenant relationship with one another. And most people don't understand covenant. Most people think that covenant is, well, I don't like what you guys do, so I'm gonna take my Bible and go home and leave the denomination. But that's not what covenant is supposed to be. Covenant is supposed to be, you know, you and I may vastly disagree on this thing, but we're still brothers. And, you know, if we disagree, and so I do this over here and you do that over there, it makes it difficult for us to have a uniform kind of, to speak uniformly on a lot of things. There is a great deal of anti-intellectualism going on right there. There's a great deal of imitating the people on TV. So much so that people think that that's what preaching truly is. And we have to combat that, and we really try to combat this stuff one congregation at a time, really, one pastor at a time. That's why I think that seminary and seminary training is so, and education is so important, because it prepares you and it opens your mind to be able to deal with so many things that so many others, you know, they don't even want to deal with. We have a difficult job. We're trying to bring theology to people who just used to go to church. That theology is mama's and daddy's theology. That has worked to get us to this point. But where we are now and where we need to go, we need to think deeper. We need to dig deeper. And I think that's the role of the pastor, to kind of get us to that point, to challenge us. Everyone should not leave just shouting and happy on Sunday. Somebody ought to leave kind of scratching their head. Somebody ought to leave kind of, I don't know about that. Because if we're not challenging people. We have to move them. We know in seminary, we get challenged and thrown against the wall and thrown outside and, you know, and have to fight our way back in. Well, we don't do that in the congregation because folks trying to stay employed. But we have to do that if we're going to build the kingdom of God. We have to challenge some things, and I've done that, you know, in our congregation, and it's been some rough spots at some times. But you know, people believe what they have been taught to believe until they are confronted with something different. And if we don't have the courage to confront them, then that ignorance is just going to continue to go, and it's going to go from one generation to the next, just like it was passed down to them.
That's interesting that you should say that, because I was thinking about typically we hear about pastors as priests and pastors as prophets, mm-hmm. you know, and pastors as leaders. But when you put that fourth element of pastor as evangelist, how could that dynamic hold creative tension?
Oh boy. I tell you what, the pastor's evangelist is a role that